It's often said that the most dangerous lie is the one that feels like it might be true. Richard Tice's recent remarks about illegal migrants supposedly leering and jeering at mothers and daughters outside primary school gates belongs squarely in that category, specific enough to evoke fear, but too vague to be verifiable. He offers no locations, no police reports, no corroborating witnesses, only his insistence that numerous schools have seen this, and that naming them might inflame tensions. In other words, we're asked to accept his accusation without the burden of proof, because revealing proof might expose the absence of it. This tactic is far older than Reform UK. We can trace it through the medieval ghetto to Venice's walled-in quarter for Jews in 1516, or the York massacre of 1190, where entire populations were blamed for everything from economic collapse to the weather. In those cases, the evidence was similarly flimsy. Whispered tales of well poisoning, ritual murder, or unclean habits repeated until fear calcified into violence. In modern parlance, these were talking points long before talk radio existed. The ghetto mentality doesn't simply confine a population physically, it traps them in the public imagination as the locus of all social ills. In the Venetian Republic, Jews were compelled to wear yellow badges and live behind locked gates at night, both to protect the majority, and to remind everyone who was to blame when crime rose, money was scarce, or plague arrived. Psychologists will tell you that othering is rarely about the other group's behaviour. It's about the majority's need for an explanation of its own discomfort. Its economically stagnant or socially strained areas, precisely the deprived communities that Tice references. Scapegoating workers and works because it relieves the pressure of self-scrutiny. Jobs vanish? It must be the migrants. Schools overcrowded? It must be the migrants. A theme park in Skegness shuts for 2 days? Somehow, even that can be folded into a narrative about them and us. Tice's own business breakfasts reveal the duality. In one breath, he speaks to corporate leaders about energy costs, taxation, and the fantasy of smaller government. In the next, he feeds his base a diet of unverified stories about migrant menace. And these two modes are not contradictory, they are complementary. The breakfast table is for policy legitimacy. The school gate rumour is for emotional mobilisation. Sarah Potchin's remarks about they sharpen the blade. She praises private street patrols protecting women and girls, painting migrants from mostly Muslim countries as sexual predators by default. This is how propaganda accelerates. One voice floats an unverifiable claim. Another adds a culturally charged stereotype, and together they conjure up an emergency in need of radical solutions. Deportations without due process, public harassment of asylum seekers, or restrictions on housing begin to look not only acceptable, but necessary. History shows how this escalates. In York in 1190, months of economic tension and rumour culminated in the mob besieging the Jewish community in Clifford's Tower, ending in a mass death. In 19th century Eastern Europe, pogroms followed a similar pattern. Gossip, grievance, then organised violence, often tacitly encouraged by local leaders. Unchecked, the politics of the phantom threat corrodes both justice and security. If the police are ordered to respond to every inappropriate sexual behaviour allegation against a migrant, as Potchin proposes, without evidence, they are diverted from investigating real crimes. If public discourse treats every migrant hotel as a crime scene in waiting, communities fracture, neighbours mistrust one another, and vigilantism finds fertile ground. The deeper danger is that once a group has been successfully cast as the ever-present risk, there is no end point. Even if the leering stops, assuming it ever happened, the suspicion remains, just as the Venetian ghetto didn't vanish when crime fell. The constructed image of the dangerous migrant will persist because it is politically useful. The late 19th and early 20th centuries offer a grim epilogue. In Tsarist Russia, fabricated reports about Jewish subversion circulated through pamphlets and papers, culminating in the protocols of the Elders of Zion, a forgery still doing damage today. Each time the pattern is the same. Start with anecdote, not evidence. Imply danger near children or women, the most emotive protection triggers. Refuse specifics for safety, so the claim cannot be disproven. Let the imagination of the public fill in the blanks. Richard Tice's refusal to name schools is not prudence, it's the preservation of a useful and heinous myth. My fear is that if Britain indulges this style of politics much longer, the outcome will echo the worst of history, a divided, fearful country where the other is always just outside the gates, waiting to be blamed.